Hello guys, welcome to Reggae Kiddies. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Thank you.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time of seeing my video, my name is Bolaji and this is Reggae Kiddies. In my last video, I showed you guys a detailed tutorial on how to make the lower part of a celestial garment of a newborn baby girl. And in today's video, I will be walking you through the process of making the upper part of the garment. And in case you haven't seen the previous part of this video, go check it out after now. I will leave a link in the description area below this video. With no further delay, let's get started. In making the upper part of a sutana for a newborn baby girl, I have my fabrics folded as you can see, and if you have been following me on my channel, you will notice I make use of pattern drafting method, which is the world standard method in clothing construction. But in this case, I will be drafting directly on my fabrics because this is for a newborn baby and the fabrics is not much. There's no much design or pattern I needed on this. So for this reason, I will be drafting directly on the fabrics. So here I have my fabrics folded into 4, making use of the measurements I'm working with. When folding your fabrics, you needed 2 measurements. That is the waist length and the chest circumference measurement. The chest circumference measurement determines the wideness of your fabrics, while the waist length determines the length of your fabrics. For instance, the waist level measurement I'm working with is 9.5 inches. So when I folded my fabrics vertically, as you can see, I folded into 4 places. I folded this the first time, which is the vertical folding. So the measurement I used in folding this is determined by the waist level measurement I'm working with, which is 9.5 inches, and I needed half of an inch to join this to the lower part. That makes it 10 inches. So I'll just mark out my 10 inches and trim off the excess. So after folding vertically, then I folded horizontally. When I was folding this, I made use of the chest circumference measurement. The chest circumference measurement I'm working with is 22 inches. Then here I have almost 13 inches, which is more than half of 22 inches. Now that I have my fabrics folded in place, the first step is to construct the neckline, and I will be making use of a square neckline, that is the prophetess neckline. Though there's no rule that guides this, but a 4-corner neckline is recommended for a newborn baby. The neck width and depth measurements I will be working with are 2.75 and 1.75. In the previous part of this video, when I was showing you how to cut and construct the skirt part of the tutorial, I told you guys that all the measurements I will be using in this video are all standard measurements, and the measurement will work for a baby between 3 and 4 kg. And I explained into details if you want to make for a baby lesser than 3 kg or more than 4 kg. So if you haven't seen the first part of this video, in order to know the exact measurement to use for the newborn baby you are sewing for, kindly check the description area below for the link to the tutorial. So now I will be inserting the neck width of 1.75. and the neck depth of 2.75. If you don't know how to locate this measurement on your measuring tape, I have a well-detailed tutorial on how to read a measuring tape for pattern drafting. In the video, I explained into details how you can read the small lines you have on your measuring tape. Kindly check the description area below for the link to the video. So with this, you'll be able to locate any value on your measuring tape. Okay, then I have it as a perfect square neckline, but I don't want to have it like this. I want to spice it up. I will make the wideness of the lower part smaller than the one I have on the upper part. So I will just be taking about half of an inch away from the lower part, like so. Then I will connect the point straight to the upper part. Then I will have my square in a slant manner. It's not going to be on a straight line like so. You can see the difference. This is the previous line, while this is a new line. So I will be making use of this. So after constructing your neckline, don't forget to add your seam allowance. The seam allowance is what will be needed in finishing the raw edges of the neckline. So I will add my seam allowance now, then reconstruct my neckline. You can as well do your calculation before drafting. You can subtract your seam allowance immediately before constructing your neckline, but I decided to do this so that I don't get confused, just for the sake of this tutorial. So the seam allowance I'm using is 0.25. That is enough for a newborn baby. This. Then I will construct the seam allowance line. So when I'm cutting the neckline, I will be cutting on the seam allowance line. Okay, so that is for the side. Then I will take the upper part upward also by 0.25. So this is going to be my new neckline. So by the time I'm finishing the neckline, it will go back to the real measurements I used. After constructing the neckline, the next step is to construct the armhole. In constructing the armhole, it requires inserting the back measurement. That is the wideness of the sutana at the back. And the back measurement I'm working with is 11 inches, which has to be divided by 2. So half of 11 is 5.5 inches. Then here is the 5.5 inches point. Okay, and I will add my seam allowance of half of an inch. Don't forget, I'm making use of freehand method, so you must not skip the part of your seam allowances. So I'm using freehand method just for myself. If you know you are not comfortable with this or you get confused, you can go ahead and make use of the pattern drafting method. Draft on the paper, then cut out your fabrics. After inserting the back measurements, then I will insert half of the armhole measurement, which is going to serve as the chest level. So I will be using 5.5 inches for that. So I will mark it out. Sorry, 5 inches. 5 inches. Okay, so I have this as the chest line. Then I will insert the measurement I have for the back on the chest line, so which is 6 inches in total together with the seam allowance. So here I will place my 6 inches. And I will make a straight line. Then I have it like so. Then I'll get the midpoint of the straight line I just drafted. Like this, and I will extend this point inward. Don't forget inward, just the normal way of constructing your armhole. The only difference here is there is no difference between the front and the back. Then here I will insert 0.3 0.375. 0.375. Okay, then I'll come to the chest level and insert 1/4 of the chest circumference measurement. The chest circumference measurement I'm working with is 22 inches. So 22 divided by 4 gives me 5.5 inches. So as you can see, here is a 5.5 inches point. It falls before the half of the back measurement. So I will have to add extra to that so that it will be enough to construct the armhole. We have it like that because this is a Sutana. The back will be very wide. There's extra value added to the back measurements. If I'm not making this for Sutana, the back is not going to be as wide as this. So, and because we've added to the back, we have to add to the chest as well. So this is where half of the chest circumference measurement stops. So it has to be after the armhole line. So I will be adding extra 1.25 to this measurement. So from here, from the mark point, I will measure 1.25, which is here. Then I will add my seam allowance of 1/2 inch. Then I will construct my armhole. So the connection is going to be from here, like this, to this 0.375, then to the back measurement point. So I'm making use of the armhole shape I have inside my pattern master. So this is the armhole curve ruler. I have the shape inside my pattern master. And in case you don't have the ruler, just make use of your hand, but make sure you have a smooth connection. So now that I have the armhole constructed, as you can see, but I will have to move this part forward a little because I have my seam allowance added on the chest level and the shoulder line already. So from the 0.375 I measured here, I will reduce it to 0.25. So that part will not be too wide after attaching the sleeve. And I will reconstruct. So when I'm cutting, I will be cutting through the yellow line I drafted. Okay guys, the armhole is done. Then we can move to the next step. So guys, after constructing the armhole, the next step is to construct the side. So in constructing the side, the waist level measurement and the waist circumference measurement is needed. Also, I will need to tell you this: when you are folding your fabrics, you don't need to fold yours as wide as mine, because what I used is half of the chest circumference measurement I'm working with. Okay, just for me to have a very wide fabric for the video. So when you are folding yours, you have to divide your chest circumference measurements by 4 so that you will not waste your fabrics, just to save your fabrics. So instead of inserting up to like 12-13 inches like mine, if you are working with 22 inches of chest circumference measurement, you divide this by 4, which is 5.5. Then you can add about 2 inches to that. So that is enough in folding your fabrics. But for the length, it still remains the length of the waist. So now I will be inserting the waist level measurements. Which is 9.5 inches. And because I needed half of an inch in joining the upper part together with the lower part, so I will make it 10 inches. So this is 9.5 inches point, and this is my seam allowance. So on the waist level measurement, I will insert quarter of the waist circumference measurement. The waist circumference measurement I'm working with is 19 inches, and because the measurement was taken in circumference, it has to be divided by 4. So 19 divided by 4 gives me 4.75. So which is here. Then I will be adding a dart allowance and the seam allowance. Seam allowance of half of an inch, which is the same as the seam allowance I added on the chest level. Half of an inch as seam allowance and half of an inch as dart allowance. And you might be wondering, is that needed on a newborn baby Sutana? Yes, it is needed. For the fact that the Sutana is for a newborn doesn't mean it should not look good on her. So the Sutana must not look like a sack. So when you add your dart, it makes it look more beautiful on the baby. So that is why I'm adding a dart of half of an inch. So from the real measurement, I will add extra 1 inch, half of an inch for that and half of an inch for seam allowance, which is here. Then I will insert the exact measurements on the seam allowance line. So which is 5.75. Okay, then I will take my pattern master and connect from the chest downwards to the waistline. As you can see, the positioning of my pattern master, can you see what I have? The curvy side is facing towards the center of my fabrics. So it is not necessary you make use of a straight ruler. You can as well give it a good looking shape. You can see this is not too curvy, and at the same time it is not on a straight line. Then from this point to the seam allowance point, it has to go down on a straight line like so. So guys, now that I have the side constructed, the next step is to plot the dart. So there's no much in plotting the dart. The dart is just going to be like a design on the Sutana to make it look more beautiful. So I need the dart length and the wideness of the dart, which I already told you that is going to be half of an inch. It's not going to be 1 inch like that of her dot. Half of an inch for the wideness of the dart, and the length of the dart is going to be 2.75 for the length of the dart. And what is going to be the distance in between each dart? I'm using 5 inches for that, which I will be dividing by 2. So half of 5 inches is 2.5. So from the center of my fabric, I will measure 2.5 inches. Which is here. Okay, then from the 2.5 inches point, I will measure the wideness of the dart forward, which is half of an inch. Then I have it. Again, from the center to this point is 2.5. Then from this point to the second point is half of an inch, which is the wideness of the dart. Then I will insert the same 2.5 inches on the chest line. Here. Like so. Then I'll get the midpoint of the 2 points I marked earlier. So which is going to be on this point. So that is 0.25. From here to here 0.25. From here to here 0.25. Then I will connect the midpoint to the marked point I have on the chest line. Like so. And I told you the length of the dart is going to be 2.75. So from the waistline, don't forget all the measurements I'm inserting are on the real waist level, not on the seam allowance. Okay, so I'm taking the measurement from the waist level line, not on the seam allowance line. So that is 2.75. And I have it here. Then I'll connect the points on both sides of the dart. Okay, then I can go ahead and extend it downward to the seam allowance line, like so. Then I have the darts plotted. So far so good, guys. We are done with the drafting of the upper part of a sutana for a newborn baby girl. So now I can proceed in cutting out my fabrics. So as you can see, I'm cutting on the seam allowance line, and here is the neckline area. Okay, so now on the armhole, I'm cutting on the seam allowance line as well. So now to the seam allowance line on the waistline, and I have this. But before opening it up, I will have to place notches on the appropriate places. So firstly, I will place notches on the center of the neckline, here, on the shoulder line, so that when I'm finishing the neckline, I will know the exact points. I have this. I already know I have half of an inch as my seam allowance on the waistline. So those are the two places I will be placing my notches. So now I can open it up for you guys to see what we have. So with this, I have the front and the back drafted together. And as you can see, I have this in 4 places. This is one part, this is one part, this is another part, and this is another part. That was why I divided all the circumference measurements into 4. So the dart I have on one side will be transferred on the remaining 3 parts. So I will have to plot the dart again on this part, and on this part.